Well, let's kick this off, guys. So for those that are joined, welcome. We're excited to be diving into expiration date management with you today. And before we even dive into content, I want to preface it with, whenever we say the word fresh, it's so easy as an industry to gravitate towards the perishable departments. For Upshop as a total store operations platform, we really focus on total store freshness, that delivering of freshness on every product that ends up in a shopper's hands, and the operational inputs and processes and technologies that make that happen. So we're really focused today in our session on the areas we typically don't talk about in terms of freshness. When we talk about center store, so dry goods, dairy, the packaged meat within the meat department, the areas that get that secondary level of attention, if attention at all, and making sure that we're really thinking about optimizing for the future and creating that complete experience for every consumer that walks in the door. Joining me on our session today, we've got two wonderful gentlemen. So we've got Mike Gulli from Northeast Grocery. He is, I got a call out, he is joining us on his time off. He is with his grandkids this week and is driven into the office to give us a maybe grandkid-free experience in his time today. So thank you, Mike, for joining us and bringing your expertise. Northeast Grocery has been a partner of ours for several years on expiration date management today, and brings a very retailer front lines experience to the conversation today. Similarly, Tony Williams on our team is a member of the Upshop team, director of customer success with us, but joined us as well from the grocery retail community, previously spending several decades with Southeastern Grocers in that operation support roles. Tony's, you're laughing at me for even calling me out on a couple decades there, but it is great to have your experience, because we worked together for quite some time in that, while you were in that role, and you got that experience in rolling out a solution yourself and in diving into the initial, from both of you, from assessment through deployment of a solution and all that there is to learn in doing so. So thank you, gentlemen, for being here with us.
My pleasure.
For those that don't know me, I'm Andrew Hoeft. I'm our SVP of Retail Strategies here at Upshop. I oversee our food waste strategies, amongst other things. And actually joined us after having built out our expiration date management company, or capabilities as an independent company, and joined in 2021 through one of the acquisitions that we have done. I'm so excited to be here and leading the session for you. Our goals for today are threefold. So first, we really want to recognize the pain points that exist in our industry today that prevent us from delivering that complete fresh experience across the store. Second, in order to solve anything, there has to be a financial driven ROI to it. So what are those levers we can look at, both hard and soft benefits that can end up giving us the capital we need to make a change in our business today, be it process or an actual technology solution investment. And then finally, these two gentlemen are not here just to sit on the screen. They are going to bring their insights from their retail background, from their operations background, to you, and help perpetuate your own conversations with your own within your own organizations. The timeliness of this conversation, it couldn't be better. We are right in one of the ever-repeating cycles that media loves to run, and we're right back on that train in the last 6 months. And you see a lot of these articles popping up in major publications across certainly North America, as well as throughout the global economies. And they're really focused on, these ones in particular are focused on, do expiration dates even matter? And I think they strike up a valuable point, right? In most cases, best if used by expiration dates are a quality marker. Those foods are entirely safe to consume well beyond those expiration dates. All of that said, customers will continue to vote with their dollars. They will choose the retailer in their market that continues to provide them the freshest product in their home for the longest amount of time, especially if prices are anywhere near comparable, right? And if we're focused as a retailer on how to deliver the best fresh department, back to that perishable conversation, we have the best fresh perishable department experience and a mediocre or subclass experience in a center of store, we're creating a reason for them to take at least part of their basket elsewhere within our market, which then erodes out potentially those exact same sales within the freshness department. And that's why that total store freshness is so important to us at Upshop, and why we want to help power that for you. When you look at our industry today and how we're solving it, it really hasn't evolved. And so intentionally here, this is a very gray slide because it is very kind of winding the clock backwards. We have not iterated largely on how we tackle expiration dates today. There is very much dependence on rotation when stocking the shelves, but I wouldn't be kidding myself, or none of us would be kidding ourselves much if we said this is not happening at the level we expect today, especially as we get into center store dry grocery departments. The reality is labor is short for everybody. And so the first thing to go when I've got a pallets of product in the back room that need to get out on the sales floor to fill a hole that's going to prevent a sale today or tomorrow is to fill that case and just push the inventory back on everything that I have in front of me. And that's because if I'm a store associate, I get in trouble today for the product that don't get up on the shelf. The product that expires tomorrow or months from now, that's largely somebody else's problem. It's corporate shrink number to look at, not the store associates. So it's just the reality of the practice is we can't rely solely on rotation to solve in-store freshness today. It's not working. So most retailers have added in incremental processes. It's known, I say spot checking here, but it's known by several different names. Rotation calendars, everybody's got their own unique label on it, but it's effectively certain sections of the store that are pre-scheduled to check on a given week or monthly cadence. So it might look like most of dry grocery is checked twice a year, baby food is checked every single month, and then over the course of within weeks within the month, certain categories from the dairy department are checked. That can be done in a couple different ways, but largely that product is called from the shelf with all those expiration dates checked, any expired product removed from the shelf, and what's missed or what's good put back on shelf, hopefully at that point now finally in good quality rotation. As much as these are meant to work, they are both very labor intensive processes, and the reality is that they're just not delivering. And I say that because we've had the opportunity to go into hundreds of stores now over the last decade plus and look at the reality of what we're seeing. And this is that. The average North America supermarket today is seeing around 1,700 expired units on shelf at any given point in time, specifically focused just on the dry goods. This is just dry grocery, not even dairy, packaged meat, some of those other areas I called out at the beginning outside of our typical fresh departments. So if I'm a customer walking into the door, there's 1,700 potential experiences or reasons that I wouldn't have a perfect experience in the store. So we really want to focus on that. From a dollar perspective, this is GMA and FMI data that we pull together, and then we've largely validated through our own findings with the retailers that we work with when we're setting these benchmarks. When we look at an average store volume of about $31 million a year, that's FMI's average supermarket stat. And then the GMA data around total unsaleables here. I'm not sure why we've used that word versus shrink in the report. I'm just repeating verbatim what the report publishes at. Is a 1.13% shrink against total store sales. And then specifically as they carve out the loss dedicated to center store dairy, packaged meat, these non-perishable department inventory, they're attributing 27% of that loss to expired food. Kind of a roundabout way to get to math that, again, we have been able to validate is very close to target for most North American grocers today at $95,000 a year in expired losses. Before we settle on that $95,000, though, to be prudent, and it's required for me to call out this cover-up that's been happening in the last couple of years. We are exiting a hyperinflationary period driven through COVID, the years of COVID, right? And as that annual inflation starts to cool, what we've been experiencing is that realistically, we measure shrink as an industry as a percentage of sales. When the sales dollar value of inventory continues to rise, but we're accounting for our cost on those on a first in, first out accounting basis, especially when you look at center store inventory where that holding time can be months or years in some cases, all of that inflation is built into the sale price, but not into the cost. So we're inflating both our margin and deflating the actual net effect of the shrink in the stores. So as that number starts to cool, we normalize back to and get closer and closer to that 2 to 3% inflation we're used to as an economy. Those shrink numbers are going to, through no change in operations, doing absolutely nothing, keeping the exact same process you have today, potentially even executing marginally better, you're going to see shrink percentages rise. And so when we're getting into this phase where when inflation cools, we also tend to put a lot of focus on cost control because sales, again, no fault of your own, tend to cool as a result. So you're selling the same amount of products, just at a lower value. that cost focus, that expense control, now is the time to be looking at this process and saying, are we doing enough? Is it time to dial up a little bit more? Within the shrink, I also want to call out where that $95,000 plus is coming from. It's very easy to say it's slow-moving product. It's new product category introductions that never took off. They never got the traction, or categories as a whole that just aren't seeing the traffic like they used to. Think granola bars, right? We're all starting to continuing to shrink those displays down further and further and further. But it's not entirely true. Yes, the bottom 25% of assortment in stores today is accounting for 38% of the expired shrink. But that 50% of assortment in stores today that are the above average sellers are still accounting for 37% of the shrink that's happening, expired shrink particularly, in stores today. What ultimately that means is this is not a people problem. This is not people aren't rotating well enough. It's not we're not getting the spot checking schedule done. It is that we still have a process problem in our industry. Again, I said it earlier, we are repeating processes that are decades old and hoping they will solve our modern day problems in our stores today. It's time for a new approach. I won't spend a ton of time here. We have the opportunity to engage with many of our other team members here at Upshop to learn more about our actual solution, but I do think it's a glimpse into what it can look like for you. So Upshop's expiration date management solution takes away that approach of saying, let's check all of the salad dressing today. Let's check all of the yogurt today, just because it happens to be on a spreadsheet, while also at the same time largely ignoring the rest of the store that's not on that list for the day, and gives a product-specific, SKU-specific notification to the store associates telling them, I need you to check this inventory because it is either close dated, nearing expiration where a re-merchandising effort is needed, or it's actually expired, which could mean it's actually out of code itself, it's hit its best if used by our expiration date, or it's within your brand standards where you simply don't want it on your sales floor anymore. That differentiator opportunity for you in terms of what freshness experience are you providing to your customers today. We do this, I think, in a way that is incredibly focused on that store associate. It is very much designed to be a guided process. They're answering questions. We're prompting them through the work with this kind of standard that says, if we ever had to pull out a user manual to explain how to do what is supposed to be a very basic standardized process in stores today, and it is today in terms of your current operations, we needed to deliver that. And we have largely met that mark. I will let the others to speak to that in a little while when we get into kind of that longevity of how does a solution like this really have staying power for your stores. And then I think what you can see on the screen here too is it's really designed in a very e-commerce based pick path approach. So feel that your associates have really come to learn and know well as e-commerce has risen in tune with the inflation with this COVID era that we're exiting. As you assess solutions in the marketplace, I wanted to give you this as kind of the current and the future landscape that we see it as. Is at the top are different metrics that we see is these are core requirements. If they don't have these, they are going to create operational gaps for you in a solution implementation. The nice to haves at the bottoms are the future focused. It is how do we continue to iterate and save incremental dollars related to shrink after we first solved for the absolute hardest part, which is delivering a solution that operationally works in our stores and is easy to execute. Within that, I think I want to call out a couple of things. ESG reporting is something that is not maybe at the forefront of our thinking in this, but it is definitely coming. Organizations are being expected to produce reporting on what our impacts are. Reducing shrink is a very clear line in ESG impacts. And ESG, if you think about it, it's really within that, I'm talking within the food waste component and showing how much food waste you're saving, the tonnage of food waste you're preventing, the impact that has on greenhouse gas emissions and water savings. Those are very easy metrics to define if we're tracking shrink. So building that naturally into these solutions or wherever that known loss tracking is happening is definitely going to become more and more prevalent. Within that too, we're starting to see that iteration again on how markdowns are happening. You might have heard of brands like Flash Food or Too Good To Go, these B2C consumer marketplaces that are giving us a kind of a last chance to save product that our normal markdown strategies weren't effective in saving in stores. And I think thinking about that total landscape, that timeline of markdowns that happen in a store and how you engage different segments of your shoppers at different times in that product's life cycle is going to continue to be important. I will stop here though, and I want to turn this over to Mike and Tony. Why don't you guys each take a stab at just calling out, in your own viewpoints on solutions today, what do you view as core? What do you view as, what's got you excited for yet to come in the world of expiration dates management?
Yeah, so I can go first. So probably a lot of you might be wondering, why is asset protection involved in date check management? This all started back around 2018, and I'll just give you a little cover story here. It happened back about 2018. It's kind of funny because I was looking at the earlier slide and I saw the 2.7% of or basis points of known shrink that was on average in each store. And it's kind of funny because as we were looking at our shrink initiatives, one of the items that came up was the growing concern of known shrink, right? Known shrink is nothing more than, hey, something goes out of code, you scan it out. That way there we're tracking it. Unknown shrink might be your shoplifting, employee theft, et cetera, et cetera. But what we found was that our known shrink at the time, back in 2018, was rising. And we couldn't get it really under control. So we were running about 35 basis points at the time, and that was well over where our target was. As a matter of fact, I don't mind sharing a number with you. We're pushing close to $1 million worse over the previous year in unknown shrink. So as we sat down and we started to form this small committee, and we started breaking apart shrink, and there were different elements of shrink, but one of the pieces that I kind of latched onto was the date management of product. And what we found was that the hours that were given to the stores, really, it wasn't being utilized the way it was supposed to be, right? So the only items that we really found that were getting rotated were the items that were touched, either that they came in on a load or it was just something known like dairy, right? But everything else wasn't. So we started to do this little blitz and with auditing, and we started going around taking a look at some of the different items. And you'd be amazed that, and I didn't even know a lot of these items, and I was in the grocery field for a little bit in operations, and there are some items that I didn't even realize had a code date on them. So if even like our merchandisers and other people didn't know what that is, how are our teammates supposed to know? So we knew we had a huge opportunity there. So what we wound up doing was, we brought Date Check Pro in, and we said, hey, basically, we hear a little bit about what you do. How can you help us? Right. And then we wound up starting up with about a 4-store pilot. But, basically this is, and I'll get into the pilot later on. I'll give Tony a little bit of chance to speak here. But we, again, we just found a huge opportunity in what was going on in our known shrink areas.
Yeah. So for me, obviously, as we talk through this today, everybody's going to get a feel for expiration date management, improving center store shrink, improving freshness. And having deployed this in 425 stores and managed it at a high level, there are some exciting opportunities for additional growth outside of that. So if you think about historical opportunities within fresh, so if you start to think about categories like specialty cheese, where we push it out for the holidays and then we take a large hit in a significant shrink impact as you typically hit that March, April timeframe that happens every single year. Additional ways to use expiration date management on challenges there. I also had, as one of my hats that I wore, reset operations. And if you're doing monthly cycle sets and category sets and even total store resets, you've got a very good feel for what your losses are and out of dates in those categories that you touch every year. This is a great opportunity to add expiration date management in the future to categories like eye care, vitamins, pain relief, baby food, all categories that when I ran reset operations would impact our organization anywhere from $100,000 to $500,000 in 1 month just from touching all of the stores and doing a cycle set and pulling out of dates, which also validates what Andrew said in the number of out of dates and the impact of that sitting in our shelves, both on shrink and impact to our customers. The other things that intrigue me about expiration date management is how it can integrate potentially into other things that we do. Most retailers are doing internal audits, and internal auditors are spending time digging in shelves. Can you use just the output of expiration date management to populate some of those scores and save time so that they can dig into other things? Using this information to generate what most folks are doing this time now is your annual sustainability reports, and having really detailed, sharp information to be able to share with the community and your shareholders. But also integrating into things like CGO, when you have significant out of dates impacting how much and how often, and the timing of when things come in. And just as importantly, if you're starved for cash, is how can you use expiration date management to also improve working capital numbers and free up cash for your company. So those are some things that I think, outside of how we typically use it today, are other avenues to continue to see more improvement.
Mike, I know when we were talking last week, we talked about now I've set the kiddo, but Mike was nice enough to go into the office, but I am working from home, and I was getting a lovely visitor, so apologies, everyone. But back to Mike, when we were talking last week, you brought up that an area of focus for you is you're thinking about expansion of expiration date management is really around, and I grounded this session and we're going to focus in the areas that are outside of perishables at the beginning, but you actually brought that up as an area of, and I think I want to talk about that for just a minute here, is and I'll let you voice over it. Where are you focused right now from how you're preventing expired losses within the fresh departments?
Yeah, so right now we're kind of traditional, right? So, we go out and we do the whole production planning, and then, everything is just based off of sales and movement, right? So one of the things we had talked about is expanding out to the upshop is how can we create this ecosystem of things, or of software or technology, where we can improve as to what we're trying to accomplish. And perishables is a lot different than center store, right? Because we have, you have ingredients, you have a lot of things that have to go into making a quality product. So one of the things that we talked about is how to, inside that ecosystem, how do we use different technologies such as CCTV to be able to look at hot cases and to look at fresh sets. And also, how do we go out there and audit, and how do we use date management to help improve the quality of our products to our consumers?
Yeah, absolutely. When we look at the world of food waste, as it's largely into kind of two phases, right? You have a prevention stage, which part of that is that forecasting we've talked about, but then just having accurate inventory counts, and knowing and having a PI that's accurate, that you can trust, so that's where the cameras come in, is helping validate what you're seeing out on the floor. But I think where we take that, and what we're looking at of how EDM continues to expand as well at Upshop, is we're looking at things like FSMA and Sunrise 2027, where really as a result of those, we're going to see the GS1 data bar, the multi-layered barcoding, become that much more ubiquitous. We're going to see it first in the fresh departments. It's pretty easy to predict that those barcodes are going to show up first on the produced items in stores, because you control those labels. We'll see them then go into the fresh departments in all product. It's where, if I'm a CPG company, I'm looking at those on my freshest inventory, because my biggest risk there is, and probably the biggest push from the retail community. And it will slowly perpetuate into center store. It's going to be quite a while yet until we see every item with the multi-layered barcode on it. But what's going to come with that is this next wave of our ability to understand our inventory, not just by a PI, but of a perpetual inventory sliced into individual expiration date segments. So the ability to be that much more targeted with our labor, and to now iterate much more in terms of how do I spend my time, how do I prioritize that labor time, and how do I really drive the absolute best for merchandising off of it, is where we're going to continue to evolve as an industry around how do we prevent expired merchandise in our stores.
Yeah, absolutely. And how does all that tie into the logistics of purchasing, and then, being able to schedule out like what you're going to produce and when you're going to produce, et cetera.
Exactly. And yeah, that circles right back to your point, Tony, right? How do you then take all of the back end? You rescued this inventory, but now how do you use the analytics, reporting off of it, to feed right back to the step number one, which is prevention? What did you produce? How much did you order, et cetera, right? It becomes a very integrated cycle as this continues to grow. I will move us on here for a second because I'm just going to step into more of what we're doing right now, which is starting to talk amongst ourselves. As we go into this fireside chat kind of portion of our conversation today, we want to hear from you. We want to hear your questions, those who have joined us. So if you want to drop, I should have said this at the beginning, I'll do it now. Please drop in the chat some questions. We will take a look at those as we get towards the end here, and we want to be able to go direct to questions. If one pops into your head later, feel free to reach out to us. We would love to engage with you and want to continue to be a resource for you on your own journeys here. So we're going to look at 4 topics beyond the innovation topic that we just spoke about. First is trigger events. Mike, you kind of gave us a prelude to yours, but I'll let you talk about it a little bit more there. What started? Where was the impetus to want to look at a solution for your own organizations? The goal for that being, if it hasn't come to you already, how might it come to you and how might you get ahead of that so you're not caught blindsided? Second, the early learning. So as you're starting to look at solutions, starting to implement solutions even, what were those first couple of days of learnings, both for yourself, but also how did you actually have to educate others in your own organization in this journey? I think both are important topics. And then the long-term success. You've got a solution in place. How do you make sure that it doesn't pass year one when continuous improvement and ops and merch and everybody's got their hands around it and is hugging it tight to make sure it gets results, and then it becomes just a standard operating practice? How do you make sure it stays at the level of results that you saw in those first in the pilot phase of a solution set? And then finally, I want to bring us to a conversation around impact on freshness and outlook on sustainability. Everybody's in a different journey. Everybody views freshness as a different level of value to their organization. So I want to hear from the two of you on that. So I'll start with that first one from a trigger event. So Mike, you already started the conversation earlier, so I'm going to go to you first on this one. Within Northeast, maybe elaborate a little more on, you were looking at the data. Were you the trigger event in of yourself and your team? Or were there other pressures around the organization to say it's time to start digging deeper?
Well, 2 things were happening, right? So the one thing was, obviously there was the shrink impact on the financial side. The other side of it was labor, right? We started to see a downtick in the labor and the quality of labor that we were getting as well. And so when you assign hours for activities for stores to do, the number one thing that they had to do is they had to put freight up on the shelves, right? We had to sell products to the customers, and some things got I'm not gonna say overlooked, but they just spent their time on what they thought was the highest priority. And obviously it is, right? We can't sell something if it's not on the shelf. But then what we really sat down and we started to think about was, you know what, if we're not doing this, like, what is the quality of the product that our customers are going to be thinking that we're selling here, right? So, what is it that our customers are picking up? And I'll go into some of the lessons learned in a little while, but you would be amazed at really what we learned when we started down this journey. So it kind of morphed into, hey, listen, let's look at financials, and we're having some labor issues, but we got to fix what we see as the problem.
Thanks, Mike. Tony?
Yeah, mine's a nice little start, or a startle, if you will. My trigger was simply a note from the CEO. We had gotten a number of customer complaints over the previous months about out of dates in our stores. And after a number of them, he sent me a note and said, when are we going to finally fix this? What do we need to do to get the stores to rotate and pull product? And from there, it was a revelation, not a revelation, but, we weren't going to strong arm the stores and to rotating and pulling out of dates and doing a better job. We had everything in place, the things that you've already said, rotation schedules. It was on our internal audits. We had task manager sign-offs, you name it, and we were doing it. It was business insanity. And I knew if I was going to do something to actually fix this, it wasn't going to be in that same realm. And I needed something different to help me fix it. And the only way that I knew was to find some technology or a different process that could get us out of the dark ages and actually make a difference.
Yeah, I'm going to stay on here as I go to this next one here, Tony, as we talk about kind of that early learnings too then, because I think that was important, right? You had to do a lot of educating in the organization in that particular topic, transitioning from what's normal, what everybody's used to a completely different approach of how to handle this process, and probably any process, right? When you try to break somebody out of a cultural norm that we have within our industry, it is difficult to do. You came up with some unique ways to do that. So maybe talk about some of that, organizational education before you go into some of maybe the aha moments you had individually.
No, absolutely. And, part of it is understanding that you're failing. So believe it or not, in a rather large organization, we didn't have visibility into, we had it, but didn't use it, how many millions of dollars and out of dates we were sending back to reclamation on an annual basis. I had to go pull that data to bring and put in front of executives. How many out of dates were being pulled on our internal audits? How many customer complaints did we have previous year because of out of dates? And at least we're able to pull data to put in front of the executive team to say, we have a problem. We need to look in the mirror and we need to do something differently from there. With that, I also brought forward the solution of what was then Date Check Pro, or expiration date management, as we talk today. And because most of the executives were lifelongers in the retail business and all they knew was grocery rotation checks, they really had a hard time believing that this process, this solution was that simple, would actually do anything. So I had to take it upon myself, because I couldn't get anybody to go out to the stores with me and do this. And I did my own video where we were actually checking dates. We logged on, checked a couple of dates, put the new dates in, and I took that 2-minute video back to our executive team and showed it. And immediately the EVP of Ops said, I want to ride stores with you tomorrow. I think this is something I want to look at. So I had to overcome internal ignorance, if you will, of what the opportunities were, to then overcoming the challenges of, we've always done it this way.
I think I love that story, and I like the interesting, because you were trying to do the exact same ask, right? You wanted them to visit stores to see the exact same thing you captured in the video. But that's many times a difficult task, right? We all have so many things on our list to accomplish in a day, and sometimes one extra store visit is just one too many. So love the creative solution that you're able to come with there. Mike, I guess you said you've got some stuff for us here from some of those early learnings. So what's been on your mind?
Yeah, so I agree with Tony 100%. Culture is a hard thing to break. And in the past, as you started taking a look at, the available labor hours that were given, and it's always an insult when you go into a store and you say to the store manager, hey, sorry, you guys just aren't cutting it. I mean, we're finding a lot of out of codes and everything else. It's really hard to do that whole paradigm shift, to be able to say, hey, what used to work in the past doesn't work today. We have something like 40,000 items that sit on the shelf, and of that, there's a certain percentage of items that need to be rotated. And as new items come in, whether they're DSD or not DSD, it's very hard for any person to be able to manage so many items and be able to make sure that we get to them and rotate. So a couple of things that we wound up doing was, the first thing was, we said, hey, listen, let's go in, let's pick 4 stores. Let's go in, let's do a full clean out. Let's bring Date Check Pro in, and let's, give them the opportunity to show us, like, really what is the issue that we have. And astonishingly, we went in, we did 4 store clean outs, and we wound up finding somewhere between $9,000 and $13,000 worth of items that were sitting on the shelf that were out of code. Now, that doesn't even mention the amount of items that were close to code or just about ready to go out of code, right? So that was an eye-opening experience for the operations team and even the merchandising team. And so we said, hey, listen, whatever the findings are, we're not going to go back and point fingers. It is what it is. And we've just identified an opportunity to make ourselves not even better from a brand perspective, but also, better from an opportunity to be able to recoup dollars before we lose them and they go out of code. The second thing we found was we did actually 4 different elements of exercise where we assigned it to a typical store person. We assigned it to who happened to be the pack person or scanning person. And that was their job, to be able to take the data and now, use the application, and then go ahead and try and manage and just try and do the overall daily management of it. And then we assigned it to a co-manager and then to a store manager. The fourth option we said, hey, let's bring in a third-party service and let's see how they handle the situation, and let's see who has the better results. And we let that run for a good 90 to 120 days. And astonishingly, we found out that, and this isn't for everybody, but we found in our environment that the best option was the third-party service. We just got so much more penetration and touch points than what the store manager would do, the co-manager would do, and even the scanning person would do. And we just attributed that to say, hey, listen, you know what? We had this many hours. Let's see if the third party can do it within the same amount of time. But the three people I had just mentioned, they were just all over they continually run all over the place. They continually have to deal with customer issues and other sales opportunities, and there just wasn't that focus there. So astoundingly, we found that the third party services, which we really want to stay away from because there is an added cost there, but we found that the results not only covered what that added cost would be, but also put money back into our profitability status. So that was very intriguing and interesting.
The test time was definitely well designed. So kudos on still common to do an A/B test, one or another. You're running 4 parallel tests to really vet it. Was well thought through, and I love that perspective of store associate through leadership within the store to that third party. Right, you're getting different levels of self-level perception of ownership, right, and that care, that intentional care that goes into it. It's a different perspective that each one of them bring, and I think we'll talk about that in a second. But when it's run through store, it takes a different level of support long term too than it does in yours. And so Tony, in stores for Southeastern Grocers, the model has always been in-store, store associate execution. So I'm going to just put a pin in that for a quick second, but I want to come back to that. For those that have joined us, this is such an opportunity here from 2 completely different execution models, right? And to learn from both as you assess what be best for your own organization. 2, I think, before I go there, I wanted to call out 2 things from the conversation that sparked in my mind. Mike, when you were talking about the execution in stores that you were seeing and the buy-in at the store level, I don't think there could be a bigger indicator of the challenge of execution in the stores beyond the 1,700 plus expired items. Of when we're talking with retailers, we're helping build out in that discovery phase together of what is this opportunity for your organization. A common question I might ask is, what does the labor look like, the labor allocation look like today to manage dates in your own stores? In the almost guaranteed answer I get back isn't a number. It's, well, do you want the budgeted hours or the actual hours? And that statement could not be a more perfect indicator of how stores are executing and our trust that these processes today of rotation and spot checking are actually getting executed. The second thing I wanted to call out, Tony, you mentioned reclamation centers. I find it very fascinating myself that when you look at financials around reclamation centers, we tend to look at reclamation as that it's pure profit, right? All the dollars we got back. But when we look at our actual strength, that's helping us recover, but we never factor in there was actually a cost of the people involved. If you're running your own reclamation center, the cost to run that center into the actual shrink number. So it's providing yet another artificial Band-Aid to what is our actual fair sizing the pie for what it really is. Doesn't mean reclamation centers are bad. I think they're an incredible financial driver for our industry. But I do think it is worth commenting on. Let's make sure when we're looking at the opportunity, we're thinking about it as holistically as we possibly can. And now I will go to exactly what I said to put a pin. So I'm pulling the pin out. Let's go, Tony, to you first, if you wouldn't mind, talking about that store level execution and really how did you set yourself up for past pilot, past rollout. This was going to be a solution that could get as close to guaranteed continued results year after year. How did you design that, and how did it play out?
Yeah, so starting with the end in mind, it played out fantastic. I mean, from a Southeastern Grocers perspective, they are premier in execution and results in ROI on expiration date management. So there's probably a number of things that go into how do you sustain this. Number one is making sure that you have internal ROI tracking so that we can continue to message and market within our own company the improvements and the results that we're seeing and driving that that continued change. But with expiration date management, there is a robust set of reporting and tools that allow you visibility to see exactly what's happening in every store, which then allow you to take a very targeted approach where you may need additional training, additional support and follow-up so that you can get the results, so that you can take the financial results and the behavioral results, put those together. And if there's gaps, then you know where you need to go work and continue to train, teach, and coach. So that's a big part of sustaining. And those are all things that are offered through expiration date management. We've talked a lot about people, and I know we'll talk about internal versus external. So I'm going to speak more on the internal side of the business. Cross-training and selecting the right folks. So in retail, we often have a habit of getting one person in charge of a particular task. And then when that person goes on vacation or they transition to another department, or, unfortunately, if they leave the business, now we're starting from scratch. So it's really not only getting multiple people that can do the work, but also the right folks. I started with DSD receivers because I think the beauty of expiration date management is the alerts can be done any time of the day. They can be done overnight, in the morning, in the afternoon, whatever works for you. So it really affords you the opportunity to pick the best person. So we started with DSD receivers who had some time at the end of their day. And actually a lot of our stores migrated to mature folks, potential retirees that were cashiers or baggers on the front end, folks that had retail backgrounds and were working 15, 20 hours a week to have some money coming in, but people that you could depend on to do this work. So it was really affording them the opportunity to pick the right folks, but also have multiple folks in your pocket. And then for me, it's really easy is what have you done for me lately? We got our initial 2 or 3 years of ROI on expiration date management. Now where are we at? We're just maintaining, if you will. So it's how do you bring the next evolution of ROI and return? Some of those things are the things that I've talked about, early on, adding the fresh categories, using reclamation to determine categories that you need to add it to. Some of the things that we've already talked through, so that I am continuing to drive additional value into future years and not just maintaining the results that we've had.
Yeah, I think in that, and then it starts to get into when we get past that phase. Now we think about how our customer success team and our business intelligence team engage with our partners today, right? The types of service that we're providing in those, as some additional examples, is really looking at the merchandising processes and saying, are the markdowns working as intended? Are they driving the sale rate that we're expecting? Are we giving up too little, therefore we're not selling enough overall? Like we've dialed the constraints, the rules around our markdown so tight that we're not able to get enough traffic to it. Or even, are we merchandising in the wrong spot in the store? Where and how are we presenting it to the customer, even make it visible to them that that markdown product is available to them? So we start to talk about those operational components and those merchandising decisions that are actually impacting the results. Operations can stay the same, but results can improve. And then within that too, just some of what you called out earlier of the actual execution metrics, right? Like the people up metrics plus the financial metrics. I just want to be very clear. And for us, that's about making sure that you don't have to go audit the shelf to have to do that. That you're not sending a manager out to go inspect somebody's work, but what can the data inherently tell us without having to spend that extra valuable resource within our store just to validate what we hope and can largely assume is being done if we have the right data inputs coming back to us. And so we spend a lot of time there as an organization making sure that's true. Mike, if I think about the world that you're in a full service, we have a partner that we've worked together to put in the stores today that's executing, as you mentioned, on your behalf, right? The beauty, as you call out, is that they aren't as pulled away from the routine tasks that they're following through customer engagements. It does happen. They will get asked by customers where a product is, et cetera, and they do engage. But your long-term ownership is different, right? You don't have to look as closely at the in-store execution, the labor. It's still important because it's still a cost factor for you. But so I guess in that different perspective, how do you think about long-term success? How do you measure performance and make sure that one, full service program is going well for you, and that two, if there's dials that need to be tightened, you're giving them the attention they need?
Yeah, and I'll probably piggyback a little bit on what Tony said as well. So if you take the outer circle, right, that's our stores, right? So to set up them for success, you hit it on the head, right? So we have a group of people that go in there, they take that burden off of the store, off of the store teams, and they know they're getting better quality of service out of there. And it's no slight to our people, our own in-house people. They just have a lot of other things to do. So when we went out and we surveyed store managers and we said, hey, how's it going? Would you want to, should we bring this in-house, or do you want to keep it the way it is? They're going to tell you, every single one of them say, please do not bring it in-house. We get far better support and service out of our teams. Then on another note, as we do these competitive audits that we do, and we had merged with a sister company a couple of years ago. They are not on expiration management right now, hopefully soon. But when we compare results of our service audits compared to theirs, we totally outscore them as far as on shelf freshness. That's kind of like the one aspect. So we know we're getting better quality of items that are sitting on the shelf. The second part of that is start bringing in the corporate stakeholders, right? So the biggest issue we had, or I shouldn't say issue, but one of the pushbacks we started getting right away is from the whole merchandising team. And the merchandising team wanted to be very careful as to what we were touching, what we were doing, et cetera. And Tony brought this up, right? Knowledge is key. So when we started pulling in some reports and getting them down to merchandising, they are now the biggest advocate. We just had a meeting the other day and they're saying, hey, we need to expand this, right? We need to pull this under our expiration management program. And we need to look at other opportunities that we may see and may have, because we didn't know that, this actual issue like really existed. So that's another piece. And even so much so that they're now starting to take the recommendations of the Upshop team to say, hey, we can improve this category if you do X, Y, and Z. Let us do it, let us measure it, and we'll show you the results. And I think that's happened, 2 or 3 times so far, right? And the big hurdle we had, Andrew, if you remember, was dairy. They really wanted us to be hands off on dairy, and I think we've made huge improvements in that whole line of category. And it even took operations a little bit of time to be able to say, hey, yeah, we're comfortable with this. So
yeah, I think you actually challenged us in a very healthy way. I remember when we engaged, we were, as an organization, very leery of single serve yogurt, for example, right?
Yeah.
I think it's a very specific example of that the dollar ring under $1 or right around $1 per unit, and it takes forever and a day to check expiration dates on a single SKU of yogurt because they're stacked high and you're worried about causing an avalanche in the section, right? So it's one of the least favorite sections to actually go work. And then the cost return was the question. Is it worth marking it down, cutting it 25 or 50 cents off and selling, and versus the labor that's going into it? And we tested that, and overwhelmingly, yes, the results were incredibly positive. Regardless of the dollar point of the inventory, it can very much be valuable. And beyond that, I think the story for yogurt is it's great the ROI proved out the way it did. It is so commonly the #1 area of customer complaints outside of our direct fresh perishable departments when it comes to out of codes in the store. So to be able to even break even in that section, yet alone return dollars to the bottom line while solving one of the biggest pain points in freshness in stores is so important. One of the other things that I've heard from other retail partners of ours is you think about, again, total store operations, connected platform, connected freshness experiences. If I'm an e-commerce shopper, whether it's in-store or utilizing partners, again, for to pick that product, the ability to confidently pick that product off the shelf and not have to check that expiration date is such a peace of mind for the partners we work with today. It's something that gets voiced very commonly to me. And the reason being is without that in place, if you look at e-commerce feedback across the industry, it's in the top 3. At worst, it's in the top 5 of what could be better about the in-store experience or the shopper experience for e-commerce. It's, well, I'm potentially paying you in a fee to pick product for me. and you're delivering the expired food or less than fresh product, right? I would have picked something different if I was in there myself. And so not having to have that burden and slow that pick rate down because you've got a process that's providing that total store coverage really kind of layers incremental benefit into that as well.
Yeah, and I also think that the feedback that we get back from the team, and again, it's the date management team that does a lot of this. They've also inspired a lot of good ideas and process changes for us. So from an operational perspective, we got a lot of positive feedback for some of the suggestions and recommendations they had, just to make sure that even on a shelf tag that we knew what was a credible item and what wasn't. And it was so simple. It was mind boggling, that IT jumped on that and we had to make some changes into our item file. So everyone knew really what was a creditable item and what was a non-creditable item. So that was a very positive. But the one key thing that I want to bring up for focusing on success, and that is, number one is that, now we have a module in place where Upshop has these other opportunities to tie in other of their products into what we've already laid the foundation for. So that's a great start. But one of the things that we did early on is that this was one of the initiatives that we make sure reaches the board of directors at every board meeting. We make sure that we highlight 4 or 5 different, just really quick touch points on expiration management that will help keep us, sustained for a while, well, hopefully forever, obviously, right? But knowledge is key. And when they understand that it's not just about, trying to, improve your margins, but also increase your brand recognition on freshness, that goes a long way.
Thanks for saying that. I think that's a wise comment and another perfect transition. You guys are like queuing up the transitions here, whether intentional or not, to the next question really well. So if you think about sustainability in that same token, I'm sure that plays into some of what your executives are asking as the next question is, what is freshness? What does our environmental impact look like? Is it so? And I know we are getting towards the end. We've got about 7 minutes left, and I'd love if there's some questions we can dive into a couple of those with a few minutes, but I don't want to skip past this. And so Mike, if you could layer in this in terms of putting a value on that improved freshness, as well as sustainability, where you're at organizationally in your own journey, as you look at that executive team, what are you hearing from them? What's that feedback they're giving you? What are the measurements, even if there are some in place?
Yeah, well, that's become a hot topic, right? So everyone knows we're in competition every day with somebody else, whether it be a restaurant, fast food place. But as our demographic of customers changing, they want things, they want meals ready, they want freshness, part of it. And again, as we sit down and we start to strategize, I was just part of a meeting, but it was more from the CCTV side. And it was more about, hey, what could you help us see in the store that maybe the data isn't telling us, right? So we're starting to layer in, and I talked about that whole ecosystem early on. It's what else can we do to help improve sustainability, reduce waste, and also give the customer the freshest product that we can. So it's going to be very, very interesting in the next year or two as to what we design out and what we test and how we can relate what we're doing back to freshness. It's insane. I've been doing this for a lot of years, and the grocery industry has changed so dynamically that it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, and I think that's just speaks very directly to trend-wise where you're going, right? The perception, the need. It's not a perception, but
no, it's reality.
It is a demand that you view as an organization that if the freshness quality is not there, if you're not able to prevent food waste, it will come back to bite your brand in more than one way, right? Tony, I guess similarly, if there's any kind of closing thoughts on this one, you've got.
Yeah, just a couple of quick comments, and we've got one chat so far, but team members these days want to be part of something bigger, right? They want to not just have a job. They want to be part of something that's important and impacts their communities. So I think sustainability is huge from an environmental perspective, from a financial, but it's a people investment as well. Brand protection is huge, and it's not measurable. everybody sells cans of green beans, but it's what happens from a freshness and in our fresh departments that set folks aside. And for me, you know, the biggest quote I had, and this was the first store I ever put it in, the pilot store. And 4 weeks later, I walked in and talked to the store manager, and I said, tell me about this rollout and what you think of Date Check Pro at that point in time. And he said, it's the first time in my entire career that I feel comfortable that I'm actually selling fresh products to my customers. And that to me is just, that's everything about not only the solution, but what we're trying to do as retailers and deliver within our communities.
Yeah, absolutely. That is not just what you wake up in the morning to do for expiration date management. That is why you open your doors every day for shoppers to come in the front doors, to give them fresh quality food and deliver an experience to them that brings them back. So, you said there was a question in the chat.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in because a good friend of mine sent a chat asking a question. What does a day in the life look like for an employee that uses expiration date management?
Do you want to cover that one, Tony, or do you want me? I feel like you've learned.
I'm glad to. I mean, so from an internal perspective, and it's usually after a shift, before another shift, because it's about 2 hours a day, or you could do it every other day and have more alerts if you did it every other day. But it's literally walking in with your iPad or your handheld. You log in, and it's going to give you the list of items in aisle category order. So you're really walking a pick flow, if you will. And it's going to say, Dole orange juice, go to it. Do you have this date on the shelf? And you look, and you either do or you don't. If you don't, you're going to say no, and it's going to ask you for what's the next closest date and how many items. If you do have it, it's going to ask you how many, and then based on the rules and the details that we've put within the system, it'll tell you either to take a markdown and or rotate it. And then you go to the next item. It is really that simple. And once again, this can be done at any time of day. Any other thoughts, Andrew?
Yeah, I think I would say just a couple of lessons learned on that too is, that thing you just ended on, the merchandising path. What do you do? Do you rotate it? Do you mark it down? Setting up for future, what we do within our platform is we have and actually this is a partnership with your alma mater, Tony, at SEG, is adding in kind of a third condition where there can be an escalation. So if a product is a really slow moving item, right, you could slap a big coupon on it and leave it on the shelf, or a store coupon on it and leave it on the shelf where it is. That might be normal process. But if one customer a month comes in to buy that, it's not going to do a thing, right? So no, that product needs a different path. It needs to maybe break norm and go to a clearance section in the store. Maybe that's product that automatically moves itself to some of those B2C consumer marketplace apps that are available today, right? So thinking about what the product is, what level of volume attention's on it, and what the right merchandising path is. Despite how much you mark it down is one thing, but where you mark it down, how it gets done, how you engage the customer is equally important in that conversation. And then from an execution standpoint, to your point on scheduling, that person who starts their day daily is like an hour or two activity versus 3-4 times a week. It is important to spread that out over the course of the week. Otherwise, your freshest departments, your dairy, your packaged meat, you're getting to after the product's already past a date standpoint. And we see by far the best execution from retailers comes from when they have a owner and then a couple backups as a total store provider for expiration dates. When it gets chunked into, I have an owner for grocery, I have an owner for dairy, and I have an owner for meat, and an owner for deli for the specialty cheese departments, it's that many more points the program tends to fall off. And it tends to be that deli associate doing specialty cheese needs to check 2 items a day. And because it's such a little volume, it's easy to forget, right? And so that ownership would be the other thing I would cover in is it's having one point person you can learn from, you can have that communication with the management team in the store back to you and provide their feedback is always the best.
Yeah, and Andrew, if you don't mind, if I could add one other thing, and I think the data that comes off of that can also help that team member, whether it be a third party or whether it could be an internal team member, to look at their productivity and how many touch points they're having. I got to tell you, I mean, right now, I can't speak for Tony, but on our side of the program, we were giving about 8 to 9 hours a week in labor hours to do rotations. right now the third party is using they are right on target of that number, and the amount of items that they are touching, there's no way I can even fathom that prior to doing this that we were getting anywhere near those items. And I still don't understand, like, even where they knew, like where to go. Tony pointed out, you turn it on, you turn on the iPad, it's going to tell you go here, 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 and here, and here's what you got to do. It's it's insane. It's a great product.
Thank you, Mike, and to you, Tony, as well. Thanks for joining us in this board in the conversation. If there's other questions, I apologize. We ran writing content in the conversation we were having so close to time. But if there's other questions we haven't been able to answer, or again, we've captured the ones that have been asked. We can follow up with you after this time. I want to be respectful of everybody's calendars and end as close to on time as we can. If you have follow-up questions, there are abundance of ways to reach out to us at Upshop. Please do use that. We would love to engage in the conversation, even if it's just you want to look at your own process, want to talk about it, and just have a brainstorm session. Myself, Tony, we lived in this so long. We're happy to have that conversation with you. So thanks for joining us, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I hope we get that opportunity to talk again soon.